Welcome and thanks for joining me on Talk the Walk. I'm Sarah Wong. The British government has unveiled a £43 million package to help BNO passport holders settle in the UK. Can a post-Brexit Britain, with its economy hammered by the COVID pandemic, cope with an influx of immigrants? And will the winds of pro-Hong Kong policy shift under a potential change in the political landscape? Executive Chairman of InvestUK, Rupert Gather, joins us from London today to take a deeper look into the implementation of the BNO visa program. Thank you for being on the show, Rupert. Happy to see you.
Sarah, it's great to see you. Good morning. Good evening to you.
Now, good evening to you too. Now, the Times reported that more than 35,000 people have applied for the 5-year program, with an average of 3,000 applications every week. Does the UK job market have the appetite for the new arrivals from Hong Kong?
Well, Sarah, one of the things that's surprised many people is the speed with which the UK job market has rebounded from the COVID lockdown. Recent unemployment figures show an unemployment rate of a little over 4%, which is functionally full employment, and also an astonishing number of vacancies, over 500,000 job vacancies in the UK. So actually, the employment market is better in the UK than it is in Hong Kong right now.
But then that would mean that the Hong Kong newly immigrated Hong Kongers will have to compete with local British people for those newly opened job vacancies.
It is true. Hong Kong people, of course, have to compete in the job market very much like they have to compete in the Hong Kong job market. I think where InvestUK has been very active is in doing surveys in the UK about people's perception of Hong Kong people arriving. And overwhelmingly, it is positive, and particularly in key attributes that make for great employment. So Hong Kong people in the UK are perceived as being hardworking, having great integrity, having great entrepreneurial skills, and those are very desirable traits in the job market. The UK economy is very similar, in actual fact, to the Hong Kong economy insofar as its weighting to financial services, its international outlook, its history of international trading. So a lot of what happens in the UK job market will be very familiar to Hong Kong people. I guess where the difference lies is with people's readiness for the job market, because clearly interview styles are different. Some of the expectations are different. So we've been doing a lot of work on ways of training Hong Kong BNO people before they enter the job market, so that they can enter the job market on an equal footing.
What kind of skill sets that the UK economy needs that the Hong Kong immigrants can provide?
Well, that's a really good question, Sarah. I would say that the COVID pandemic has shifted the economy quite a lot in the last year, as it has internationally. So, for example, some parts of the economy really have suffered. I'm thinking about high street retail as an example, some of the hospitality sectors. But other areas where Hong Kong people can really expect to add value have done extremely well. Obviously, the online world has massively increased. A lot of financial services has moved online. That suits Hong Kong people who are very used to that environment. So there are different bits of the economy that are very active. The one thing I would say, which I think is very important for Hong Kong people to remember, is that, in my view, the really smart people actually start up their own company as opposed to look for a job. Because if you've got the courage to start your own business, then you're in control, you can research the market, and you can build your own wealth and your own family's wealth in a very dynamic economy like the United Kingdom.
Yeah, on that note, the government, after unveiled the £43 million package, the government said applicants will be expected to be self-sufficient and contribute to UK society, and the implementation of this visa is estimated to have a net positive impact on the UK. Isn't it easier to quantify the immigrants' contribution to the UK society by if the government introduces or widens the types of skilled-based visa, such as innovator visa, perhaps?
Well, the B&O route is specific to Hong Kong. It's unique to Hong Kong. There's no other route in the world like it. And it is, by any migration standards, extremely generous. I'm surprised, delighted, of course, but surprised how generous it is in the way that it treats families. I don't think it's unreasonable for the British government to expect Hong Kong people to demonstrate that they are trying to contribute to the UK economy. That's the trade-off, if you like.
Well, just as you mentioned, it's quite a generous offer on the UK government's part. And there's also a dedication being made to education, employment, well-being, and a lot of things. That's quite a sizable amount of money during a time of economic duress of the UK government under the COVID pandemic, which actually prompted Chancellor Rishi Sunak to raise corporate tax to offset the national deficit. Does the UK government bite more than it can chew by rolling out the scheme?
That's a very, very interesting point, Sarah. In the big scheme of things, £43 million in an economy the size of the UK's economy, which is the fifth biggest in the world, is not a lot of money, actually. For the people who are coming, it works out at around about 3,000 Hong Kong dollars a head. So I don't think it is the amount of money that really is the issue. I think there is an interesting question to ask about how well is it being spent, because a lot of whilst I'm delighted the government has committed that amount of money, I think they need to be a bit careful to really analyse who is coming, what demographic of people are coming, so that they can really target the money in an effective way.
Okay, you mentioned the traditional cultural impressions that depict Hong Kong people as hardworking, entrepreneur. Can you foresee any potential side effects under that sort of perception, and could it complicate their efforts to integrate into the British society?
Well, any society has to be careful about integration. This is not a point about Hong Kong. This could be I remember a few years ago, the same issue about people from Poland arriving in the UK in large numbers as part of the EU. So this is not particular to Hong Kong. I think the British people are extremely generous-minded when it comes to migration. We've had migration flows for hundreds of years in the United Kingdom, and approximately 15% of the population is migrant in one form or another. I think there's around about 500,000 people of Hong Kong extraction in the UK. One of the reasons people like it is because they probably have friends or family or friends of friends already there. So the underlying fact is that there is no integration problem. I think where the British people do expect, and the government has reflected this in the rules, what they do expect, the trade-off, is for people to be seen to be trying to contribute to the greater good of society, primarily by being economically active. I think where the mistake would be is if Hong Kong people came to the UK on their savings, didn't really plan to try and enter the UK enterprise economy, that could create some negative feedback. But provided people are willing to contribute, and every Hong Kong person I've ever met is a real contributor, then there won't be a problem at all.
Now, you're the executive chairman of InvestUK, and I understand a significant portion of your company's business comes from China. Will the introduction of the B&O visa scheme in any way impact the partnership of your company and your Chinese clients?
Well, we are not a political organization at all. And of course, we understand and feel very sad about the political complexities of the relationship with China and indeed with Hong Kong. But we are primarily dealing with entrepreneurs at InvestUK. And entrepreneurship is like an international brotherhood or sisterhood, because entrepreneurs speak the same language. It doesn't matter whether they come from China or from Hong Kong or from America or from Brazil. Entrepreneurs are, and I'm speaking as an entrepreneur, so obviously I'd say this, entrepreneurs are the finest people on the planet, regardless of where they come from. And we really celebrate that and look beyond the politics into what we can build together.
Now, in 2016, you've launched a £1 billion education bond to provide an opportunity designed for Chinese students studying in the UK. As we mentioned before, the B&O visa scheme also dedicated resources to education. Is there overlapping area between your scheme and the government's B&O visa scheme, and is there any potential competition?
Well, our programs, and that's one of the number of programs that we have, are targeted at individual groups. So the education bond program, for example, is aimed at international students, not specifically Chinese students. The reason that we directed it primarily in China is because China is one of the biggest groups of international students in the UK, approximately 120,000 a year. So students is a distinct demographic, but then, as I said, entrepreneurs are, and as are business people. So what our role at InvestUK is to look where the appetite to invest and build businesses and work in the UK is, and then present products and services and help to those groups.
All right, let's take a short break here. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Talk the Walk. With me now is Executive Chairman of InvestUK, Rupert Gather. Rupert, thank you very much for joining us again. While we briefly walk over the implementation, the potential ramifications on the UK job market under the B&O visa scheme proposed by the UK government. Now let's move on to the property market. We know that house prices in the UK surged to a record this month under tax break on purchases and record low interest rates. Do you foresee any further impact caused by an influx of Hong Kong immigrants on the UK property market?
Well, so that's a very interesting question on UK property. The short answer is no, and the reason is because Hong Kong people, when it comes to property, are some of the cleverest people on the planet. And what they'll very quickly work out is smart places to buy. Because although you are correct that the property market is at an all-time high, it is regional. So Hong Kong people will find that, for example, London property is very expensive. Not as expensive as Hong Kong property, I have to say, but it is very expensive. But you don't have to get too far out of the southeast of England to have significantly better value property, even with the higher price. So, for example, the city of Manchester is famous in Hong Kong for being a great community. The property prices are at least a third less than London, but the average salaries are only 10% less than London. So that feeds eventually into quality of life. And with a great mix of housing stock, from new builds to refurbished historic buildings. InvestUK is not directly involved in property, but we do, of course, understand that it's a very significant feature of people's planning when they come. And a recent survey we did showed that actually 90% of B&O entrants to the UK are considering buying property. And I'm not surprised, but I think they will be quite savvy where they buy the property.
All right, I would like to move on to domestic politics. As we know that next month, tens of millions of Britons, will head to the polls to elect local councillors across England. The latest national polls show that the Conservative Party holds a healthy lead over the opposition Labour Party. Now we know that the Tory government under Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a strong proponent of Hong Kong's democracy movement, and they rolled out this pro-Hong Kong policy. Is the British people going to bear that in mind when they cast their ballots next month?
I think there will be some bounce for the Conservative government primarily because of the success of the vaccine program. That's inevitable. But do remember, Sarah, these are local elections, and in local elections, it's very hard to predict because there's clearly a big impact on local issues. One to watch for Hong Kong political junkies is what happens in Scotland. And I think that is important because the leading party in the polls there is the Scottish National Party. And the Scottish National Party, of course, want to secede from the United Kingdom. Yes. That would be a great mistake in my view, but ultimately it's going to be up to the people of Scotland. So that would be the one I would watch rather than the local elections.
Okay, we know that a general election is coming up in 2024. That's in 3 years' time. Do you foresee, is it possible there will be a U-turn of the UK policy towards Hong Kong if the Labour Party takes power?
I hadn't thought about that. I think it's very unlikely. The UK government's policy to Hong Kong is universally popular. Firstly, because the British people and therefore their politicians believe it's the right thing to do. Because Hong Kong and the United Kingdom have been friends and partners in a long historic relationship over 300 years. And the British people have always prided themselves of being loyal and looking after their friends. And friends don't come any better than the people of Hong Kong. So I think the policy is here to stay. Clearly, there might be shifts in some of the detail, but I think the underlying policy will remain, and that welcome mat will stay out.
Now, here comes the tricky part. Earlier this week, Veterans Minister Johnny Mercer was, quote, forced to resign, and he went on to attack the Tory government and said almost no one tells the truth. The former defense minister also blasted Downing Street for failing to protect veterans who fought in Northern Ireland from unfounded prosecutions. Now, sir, you yourself served in the British Army in the 1990s. How convincing is the Johnson government's promise to Hong Kong people when it can't even be seen as treating its own veteran, its own soldiers justifiably?
Well, I have a great deal of sympathy for Mr. Mercer and what he's tried to achieve for veterans. But I think people have to understand that it's a very complex area. The British government's not stupid. They know that the easy and probably the correct thing to do would be to provide some immunity for the British for the veterans from Northern Ireland. And as indeed they have done, for example, for veterans from Iraq. Not complete immunity, of course, there's still criminal prosecution is possible for capital crimes. That hasn't changed, but the underlying immunity for acts carried out by soldiers in the course of their duties. The issue with Northern Ireland is very complex because any immunity given to British soldiers would, of course, have to be therefore also be given to the descendants or the people on the other side of the Troubles, the Irish nationalists. And there's some pretty nasty people out there who I think the British people would feel very upset with if those guys got a free pass. So whilst I completely sympathise with what Mr. Mercer's trying to achieve, I do respect the government's view that this is very nuanced. I don't think there's any connection with Hong Kong. I don't think people can infer anything from it. I think it's for the people of Hong Kong on the British government's action.
Is the current sentiment of support of Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement and Hong Kong people result of backlash of Britain's failure to protect Hong Kongers in the 1990s following the Tiananmen massacre?
Well, Sarah, that's a very interesting question. The British people and British government have always operated within the rule of law. That's the whole basis of the economy and the way we run things. The British people set out a deal with the Hong Kong that honoured our historic obligations through the handover agreement. And whilst that agreement was being honoured, then I think the British government feels that it had honoured its commitments. The issue now, of course, is the situation has changed. I know that the Chinese government would disagree, have a different interpretation, but the situation has changed insofar as British government believe that that handover agreement is not being honoured, and therefore their attitude has correspondingly changed because the commitment remains. So I wouldn't call it a backlash, but I would say that the British government wants to demonstrate that it is standing by the people of Hong Kong, and if it can't stand by the people of Hong Kong through a negotiated international treaty, then it has to find other ways to stand by the people of Hong Kong, and that in this case, it's offering the B&O program.
Now, Rupert, you've given a TED Talk in 2018. Now, in the talk, you struck me as a patriot and also a globalist. How confident are you about Britain's strength in a post-Brexit era?
I believe that patriots are people who care about their country, of course they do, but also are confident about their country and are able to look out and look the world in the eye. Now, the United Kingdom is very well placed to do that post-Brexit and indeed post-pandemic, because it does act as a pivot between Asia, including Hong Kong, of course, Europe, who remain geographically close, but also great friends of the United Kingdom, and America. And therefore, being an English-speaking nation with a large economy in the right time zone, pivoting between those three very large blocks or areas, puts us in a fantastic position. So that when the Prime Minister Boris Johnson talks about global Britain, I don't think this is an empty rhetoric. I think this really means something. And I think it's something that British patriots can really embrace as we go into the next phase.
Okay, before I let you go, that's all the time we have today, not much. But before I let you go, I want to ask you one last question. Do you think the British people, the general public, are going to see the Hong Kong people moving in Britain and call them their British counterparts?
Well, it goes back to this point about assimilation. It's interesting that the £43 million allocated as a sort of the welcome money is coming from the Department for Communities and Local Government, not from the Foreign Office. So the British government is acutely aware of the need and the importance and indeed the opportunity that is presented by successful integration of Hong Kong people into the UK. But as I said earlier in the interview, the character traits of hard work, of integrity, of entrepreneurship, and sense of humor, and all those great traits that the Hong Kong people demonstrate are so closely aligned with those of the British people that I think this integration is going to go brilliantly.
Okay, thank you for being on the program today, Rupert. And for those who are watching, I'll see you right here on Talk the Walk next week. Stay tuned.